Today on the Servant Leadership Podcast, we hear from Cheryl Bachelder, a highly respected business leader who transformed Popeyes Louisiana Kitchen into one of the most successful restaurant brands in the world. Cheryl has built a career on servant leadership, leading with purpose and driving results. As the former CEO of Popeyes, she took the company from declining sales and struggling franchisees to record-breaking growth, all by putting people first. Under her leadership, Popeyes experienced unprecedented success, with franchisees thriving, customer satisfaction soaring, and the brand reaching new heights, all while fostering a culture of trust and service. Cheryl has also held executive roles at KFC, Domino's, and Chick-fil-A, making her a leader in shaping how businesses succeed through servant leadership. In her book, Dare to Serve, Cheryl shares her bold philosophy on leadership, how putting others first isn't just good ethics, but great business. I'm excited for her to share today how servant leadership can empower your team, accelerate growth, and drive real results. Cheryl, welcome to the Servant Leadership Podcast.
Thank you, Chris. It's great to be here.
Like I told you, I am so honored that you are here because you are truly an expert on servant leadership. I was thinking about your journey and just thinking about how you've worked with some of the most recognizable brands in the world. Could you share with our audience your career path and what that looked like?
Oh, I'm happy to do that, but I'll try to keep it shorter than it is because it's been a long and lovely experience. And of course, when I started my career, I had no idea where servant leadership was going to fit into the picture. But I went, I guess I think I'd start first with family because I'm the oldest child of four. And oldest children have natural leadership traits. And so I do think it inspired my career in some ways. And my dad was a really strong business executive, successful in his own right. And he was one of my biggest mentors. Interestingly, all four of his children became, I would say, highly purpose-driven, ethical business leaders. So I attribute a lot of my path to my family. They were very intentional about a few things. My parents focused on faith. They focused on family as your, kind of circle of support. They focused on incredibly strong education and Midwestern hard work. My dad came from a dairy farm. My mom grew up next to a steel mill. I mean, these people worked hard. And so that is very formative. So then I came out of IU's bachelor's and MBA program with a business degree in finance and marketing. I always say I majored in marketing because I loved it. I majored in finance because I hated it. And it turned out to be prophetic because you need all of that, right, in business, not just one. And then I promptly married my husband, Chris, right after business school and first job. We met at Procter & Gamble. We've been married 43 years today, raised 3 adult daughters, and now have a passel of grandkids that are crazy fun, 6 of them to be exact. So career path, I strangely knew that I thought I knew. To the best of my ability, I knew that I was supposed to both work and raise a family. And boy, that was weird in the year I began work and raising a family. Like nobody was doing that. It was really popular to be dual income, no kids family. They were called dinks at the time. That was popular and trendy. What I decided to do was anything but popular or trendy. And so I was kind of always swimming uphill in a certain way, right? Didn't have a lot of role models. But I worked for great companies. So to your question, I came first out of college to Procter & Gamble, incredibly strong training company, smart people, super integrity, ethical, really aligned with my values, taught me a ton. It was the best MBA I ever had. And that really just kicked off my career journey because Procter & Gamble is good to have on your resume, I guess. And it led to Gillette, and then it led to Nabisco, where that first 15 years of my career, I was deep into brand management and brand development, kind of marketing and new products. I pivoted halfway through my career and joined the restaurant industry. That's a whole story in itself, but the short version is I really wanted to apply my skills in a new industry. And I fell in love with franchising, working for Tom Monahan at Domino's Pizza. And he just, gave me an opportunity to find out how exciting it is to be part of the franchising world. And so that really led to my restaurant career, which is what most people know about me. I'm kind of a chicken queen, but I started in pizza at Domino's and then KFC and then 10 years at Popeyes. And today that's resulted in some wonderful board service opportunities at Chick-fil-A, where I serve as lead director, and U.S. Foods in Chicago.
It's a fascinating journey. And a lot of people know about Popeyes and your experience with Popeyes. And really, Popeyes' transformation under your leadership is legendary. There's so many people who talk about it, but it seems like it only went good when you got there. At least that's what it seems like from the outside. But I know that there were a lot of challenges. What were some of the challenges that you were facing in really transforming Popeyes?
Oh, yeah. I mean, I can turn that whole question upside down because Popeyes was the last place you expected legacy business performance results to occur. And really, the only reason I became CEO of Popeyes, and I tell people this all the time, is because no one else would take the job. I was sitting on the board of Popeyes. A good friend of mine was the chair. He asked me to come help. I had chicken experience. Okay. Joined the board. A year later, the CEO quits. The business could not have been in worse shape. 7 years of declining sales, franchisees making no money, which kind of busts the whole point. Morale was terrible. The franchisees wanted to sue the franchisor. I mean, it was chaotic. It was bad. And it didn't look on the surface recoverable. And so the first thing I always tell people, it did not look like a place to create a legend. Anything but. I want you to think about that in your own careers, because I then have basically made a career out of teaching people how to run in burning buildings and turn around companies. It's a really rich career path, but man, it's full of risk. It's very scary sometimes. And yeah, usually nothing goes right. For my first 4 board meetings as CEO of Popeyes, every time I had a board meeting, I told my board more bad news. I said, I picked up a rock and there was more poop under it. It just kept coming. So yeah, the beginning of a transformation in your leadership. If you're going to be a transformation person, you have to get really comfortable looking at complex problems, things that have been embedded in the business or the culture or the strategy for years, people who aren't all that psyched about turning it around. They kind of like the mess. And so you have to really enjoy kind of the ugly. I just literally said to my assistant this morning, I don't know why it is, but if I join your board, some mess is going to happen. I promise, because I only do messes. And this happened recently in a nonprofit where I oh, sure, I'll help you out a little bit. Oh, my goodness, what a mess. So that's what I've learned to enjoy and appreciate. But it took us 3 years to get to kind of the things we're catching at Popeyes. It was not 3 months. The first several things we tried failed. If you remember, in the fall of 2008, the whole banking industry failed. That's when we made our big investment in media to turn around Popeyes. Kind of bad timing. It just looked like that over and over again. Most of our ideas didn't work the first time. Took a lot of tenacity. It took a lot of, oh no, let's try something different. It took a lot of transparency with our shareholders and our board because we needed time. It wasn't going to be fast. Yeah, it was fun.
One of the things that hopefully people know about, and we'll make sure to link to this, is you wrote a book called Dare to Serve. And in part of your journey of servant leadership is jumping into all these messy scenarios. And from the outside, probably a lot of people were skeptical, whether they were stakeholders or franchisors or whoever. They're skeptical of, can you turn it around, or just thinking negative thoughts because it's just stuck in them. How did you keep an attitude of servant leadership through all of this stuff?
Well, I think it goes back to why I took the job in the first place, because yes, the board asked me to take the job, but the real motive was I was looking for a place to practice servant leadership and figure out what is the how-to on servant leadership, right? There's a great philosophy in servant leadership, but how do you do it? And does it create a place that yields great performance results? Literally, the first time I said servant leadership to my board, they said, yeah, whatever, as long as it creates results. We don't really care what your shtick is. We need the share price to go up. Can you do that? And so the real challenge to me was to put some things in practice that I deeply believed in out of my study of servant leadership, my observation of other servant leaders, and just instinct about it. I said, but I got to try it and see if I could prove it to some people. So I call the book just one case study in servant leadership that might give you some how-to language around where do I start, what do I do, does it work, does it yield results? That's the reason for the subtitle. If servant leadership doesn't generate results, nobody's going to read your book or try it, right? The end. And so that's where the credibility in this conversation comes from. And everyone who aspires to be a servant leader needs to remember this point. If your approach to leadership does not generate results, no one will be interested in it. I promise, right? And it's not because we're all greedy, profit-driven executives. That's not my point. Have you ever seen a fumbling, poor-performing company where people were thriving and giving their best work? No, never. I had a guy that worked for me for many years who said, yeah, if sales are down, everything's wrong. There is nothing good to transport or teach out of failure in running businesses. And so servant leaders buck up, and we have to bring both the principles of servant leadership and the performance results with it. I made a decision out of my KFC experience, which frankly didn't go so well. I made a decision that I want to lead in a way that allows people to perform their best work and creates performance results that catch other people's attention, right, Chris? Because that's what Popeyes did. People are only interested in that Popeye story because it yielded some amazing results on these principles that you and I care about so much.
I think that's so key because a lot of people maybe are like your board where they hear servant leadership and it's totally separate from results. And that's one of the things I absolutely love is that servant leadership is the driver of helping you achieve outstanding results, right? That's what you talk about in the book.
Could I add one point on that, Chris? Because, I was working in a public company with Wall Street analysts all over my business all the time. And I had to give investment performance conferences in New York all the time. And literally at one of them, a 26-year-old stock analyst said, why on earth do you talk about servant leadership in your investment presentations? And I paused and I looked back at him and I said, because I honestly believe it's leading to the outstanding performance results of the company. And he looked at me and goes, okay, I'm good with
that. What is the biggest misconception about servant leadership based on all those conversations with analysts like that and boards? Is that the common theme?
Absolutely. I think the skepticism among, cultural leaders, the norm, which is, we all know, errs strongly towards performance, right? Kind of the sole reason, profitability and share price and all that. They kind of can't conceive that anything like servant leadership would matter. And so they think of it as squishy, soft, doormat leadership. I call it kumbaya and campfires. I mean, they just see no point in the practices. And in fact, I've interviewed with a lot of private equity firms who would like to have Popeyes turnaround results. And a couple of them actually did this. They said, can you bring some of that to, our company? And I said, do you mean pixie dust? What do you mean? I don't have a magic wand. I have principles that lead to performance. But it's a very bizarre concept to those that exclusively think business is a financial endeavor for the shareholder, that it's not all that interesting to them. So to be credible, we have to poke at this conversation with a lens of performance.
When you hear servant leadership, how would you describe that to people? Because people might have all kinds of misconceptions. How would you describe servant leadership?
Well, the way I chose to define it in Dare to Serve was on those two principles. A servant leader has to have the courage to lead the organization to a daring destination. You have to have big ideas, big plans. You have to inspire, motivate. You have to take people somewhere, right? People don't want to do status quo. People don't want to continue to fail. So you've got to be bold and daring in your strategy and your approach. And yet, this is the other side of the coin. You have to be so motivated to be humble and walk with them on that journey, come alongside. And that's where you create the conditions for outstanding performance, right? Because people also don't want to go alone to the top of Mount Everest. They go in teams, and there's a reason for it. They don't want to die. And the same is true in our human nature at work. We do yearn to go to bold, exciting places, but we're scared. We're not sure we have all the skill sets to get there. We want to go in a team, and we want our bosses, our leaders, to care about us on the way. I work now for Chick-fil-A, where their aspiration is to be the most caring company in the world. And think about that. When we care about the people that they're really entrusted to us as leaders, right? People are entrusted to us for a time and for a season. Wouldn't we want to care about them in many ways? Care about their skills being in the right job, care about giving them clear expectations, care about coaching and feedback, care about helping them be successful? Wouldn't that be a good way to get to performance results? So those are the two things, courage and humility.
How did you find a way to measure that?
That's a good question, because there's not a pure path to measuring courage and humility. So you're actually, Chris, you're the first one to ever ask that question, which I love, because our plans at Popeyes were all measured. We were just metric mania. We loved measures. So I would say the daring part we measured in sales growth and market share, how boldly are we changing our position in the marketplace, right? Is it moving? And we were in a downturn in our industry. So market share was the measure. You wanted to be growing. The humility part, much harder. But our primary measure was the engagement, and you can measure engagement, how much people feel they're getting the good information, the good support they need to be successful. We measured engagement with our franchise owners and with our restaurant leaders and with our staff at headquarters. And we believed that highly engaged people were being treated well in general, right? Because the tenets of engagement are trust, communication, feedback, knowing where the place is going, all those good things. So that's what we measured in particular. But now I'm going to spend the rest of the day trying to figure out how you measure humility, because that could be a whole new book, Chris. That's a good question.
I'm excited to read it when you write it.
Well, here's what I know about humility. And we put this in our values at Popeyes. We said we value humility. We didn't say we had it. And as a leader, if you say you are humble, the people don't think so. So it's a really good idea not to claim it, but to aspire to be it on a day-to-day, situation-to-situation basis, because it's hard. It's really hard to lay down our own stuff and be interested and care about other people consistently. So you can only aspire to it.
I think a lot of people can resonate with some of your journey of turnarounds, and how you've taken multiple different situations that seemed like it was just the lowest it could get, and then it kept getting lower and then continued to raise. How would you think through practical steps that somebody could take to really turn something around that isn't working out right now?
Well, I'll tell you the very first step, and I'm working with a nonprofit leader on this right now, usually in a situation of poor performance, there are many things that are wrong, but there's only a few things that'll get it back on track. So the example from Popeyes, I did an audit of all the things that people were working on when I got there, and there were 128 active projects. And as I told you, sales had been negative for 7 years. So those projects were not working. And so we literally did an offsite work session with the top 40 leaders of the company to figure out what was broken, the most important things that were broken, and whether or not we in the room had the courage to fix the few really big broken things. I'll give you just one example. We were called a quick service restaurant, QSR is what they call fast food chains. And we had our speed of serving you was 98 out of 100 chains. So we were not quick. And so we decided that we'd better tackle that, right? If you want to be a QSR, you need to be quick. It sounds so stupid obvious, but we were not. And it was hard to do because we had a complex menu. We had high turnover. I can give you 100 reasons why it's hard. But the reality was if we couldn't get a fast drive-through, our volume was capped. We couldn't handle any more customers than we had. And we only were doing $1 million per unit at that point, and that wasn't very good. So we needed to crack the code on speed to be a quick service restaurant. So my favorite quote that I put in the book is at that very meeting, one of the employees who'd been with the company 30 years, I asked the whole audience, are you game to go after speed of service and actually fix it this time? And Sandra raises her hand and she said, I've always wanted to do that. Can't wait to be on the team, right? I mean, 30 years, she's hoped for the company to be excellent at the core competency of what we do, right? She'd like to be a part of that. I think it says it all, right? Wouldn't you like to be part of a company that's run well and doing well, right? It's a good thing.
That's a great point. You had to have people that were on board with what you were pitching, right? Because a lot of people lost belief before you got there, and probably even through those first 3 years, they were losing belief in the ability to turn things around. How did you figure out who the right people were, and what encouragement or tips would you give to people listening to figure out how do you build the right team around you?
Yes, I always say it starts with your strategy and tactics because that determines what skills and capabilities you need. So you always do strategy before talent. It's strategy, talent, culture is the order. And so then you profile the grid of skills that you need on your team to be effective. Like, for example, we had no supply chain capability at Popeyes when I got there. I'm not even sure I knew what supply chain meant, but I know that you're supposed to have it, so we went and recruited a supply chain expert to join our executive team, fill that gap. And so I went around the table and said, what does my current team have? What are we missing? Over a few years later, we needed new finance capabilities because of the fast growth and the need to understand, control, and manage our shareholder expectations. And I recruited a new CFO at that point in time. So it's constantly looking at your strategies relative to your capability. And by the way, your board has to do that at the same time to stay with you. Your team has to stay ready for the game that you're in. What was the second part of that question?
Just how would somebody else find the right people? And I think you kind of described some of that.
Yeah. So I wish there was like pixie dust for that. But it's hunting for people that you've heard wonderful things about, right? And doing some of the work yourself, because search firms only know so many people. You've got to really hunt. I was in hunt of a servant leader, human resources person, and there weren't like 3 in the United States. And so, but I heard of one. She was actually working for IHG, the hotel company that was across the street from Popeyes. Much bigger, much more sophisticated, much higher resource. And I said, okay, well, she's probably making a fortune. I probably can't get her here. How will that work? I just started meeting her at Starbucks until she finally took the job. I think I took her to Starbucks 6 times, probably before she even started thinking about being our head of HR. But I convinced her that she could leave that big monolith corporation and come to this scrappy turnaround situation and put to work all the things she'd learned, and really put her fingerprints on things. And she came. Her name's Lynn, and she did a phenomenal job. We're great friends to this day. But it's that kind of personal investment in chasing down people and explaining the vision and making sure they're the kind of people that want to be part of something like that. Because that's why people come. They don't come for the paycheck.
Yeah. You tried so many things before you hit the right things. And one of the things, both on the career side and just in the day-to-day job side, is trying to figure out, how do you fail fast, right? People talk about fail fast. And I'm wondering, how did you know when it was time to stop different career moves that you were making? And how'd you know when it was time to stop various things that weren't working well? And how'd you discern all of that? Because you had to discern a ton of major decisions that affected millions of people.
Discernment is first a really good word choice. There's always too much to do. There's always too little time. There's always not enough money. So you really have to, a leader has to force themselves through a disciplined discernment. And the example I would give you there, we created a roadmap, a strategy on one piece of paper for Popeyes. And we started saying there's 11 things we have to do to fix this company. And we actually put 11 teams in place to chase those things. And then we realized we weren't doing them very well. So we narrowed it to 7 things. And you know what? When I really look back with clear lenses, we did 3 things really well out of the first 11 we picked. So I cannot overestimate this discernment to keep honing and narrowing the focus. Because when you get to the 3 things, and for us, it was very simple. We had to have menu innovation that gave you a reason to keep coming to Popeyes. We had to be fast at the drive-thru, and our franchisees had to make money or they quit. It was just, those were the lenses. And every time you got distracted running down some rabbit tail, you had to go back and look at that and say, oops, nope, these are the 3 things that make our business model sing, right? Every business model has levers. It can be a nonprofit school, it can be General Motors, but every industry has 3 or 4 levers that you have to be on top of and performing well to survive. And so focus. I call it focus on the vital few. And all of us are inclined to wander, I'm included, grab that list back. I did personally, the whole time I worked at Popeyes, I did a 90-day plan every 90 days where I took that lens of our vital few priorities and checked to make sure that I was only working on the vital things, right? Because it all rolls downhill if you're the leader, right? If you go, and I'm an idea person, so I've got the ability to wander. And I had to constantly rein back my propensity of new ideas and have people around me that said, oops, stop, Cheryl, don't need any more new ideas. We're trying to become an innovative company that's fast and makes money. So just stop it, Cheryl. Surround yourself with people that will tell you the truth. But it's that focus and disciplined process of staying focused.
So you've led some of the world's most recognizable brands. You're now on the board of some of the world's most recognizable brands. When you think through what legacy you're leaving behind, talk to us about how you're viewing this next part of your career and your journey.
Well, I'm at a really blessed stage of life where I get to think about things like that, right? When you're married, raising kids, working full time, there's a lot going on. But at this stage of life, I can be really disciplined and focused about how I give back to the business community and the area I've discovered that's so rich, the nonprofit side of things. And so, as you said today, I'm so honored to serve the Chick-fil-A brand as lead director of their board. And then I sit on the U.S. Foods Board in Chicago that delivers food to all these restaurants that I love around the country and has a phenomenal management team. So it's a gift to get to stay in the for-profit world and bring my skills around strategy, talent, and culture to bear. And those 2 companies are a great fit for me, and I've enjoyed giving back to them. But the discovery part, Chris, has been the nonprofit world. And specifically for me, because of my faith background, it's ministries, is I kind of never spent a whole lot of time sharing my skill set or giving back to ministries. I gave money. I gave a bunch of money. And I had favorite things like a ministry in Michigan that reaches rural kids, and a camp for kids in the summer that's just amazing, and a school here in North Carolina that my dad founded. I had all kinds of places I thought were doing cool work, and I wanted to be a part of it. Therefore, I wrote a check. But the blessing now is I sit on their board, or I mentor their CEO, or I help the board figure out how to find the next CEO and turn around their ministry from poor performing to high performing. And they need every bit of the for-profit skills that I have in the nonprofit or ministry sector. And I really encourage your listeners to think about this before they retire, because it's true today in your community, in your passion points for nonprofit work or ministry. Those people need you now. And here's how I ask you to think about it. I used to be kind of befuddled by the church, right? Because the church always asked me to be a volunteer in the 2-year-old nursery. I am really not very good at that. I can tell you 100 reasons why, but that's just not my gig. And they would ask me to bake cakes for the cake sale. Also not a gift of mine. But the church never asked me about my business gifts, right? Never asked. And I'm like, now I look back on it and say, well, I could have volunteered. I could have said you had no HR function and no culture function in your church. I could have helped you, right? So whatever your business gifted is, go look around at the ministries and nonprofits you care deeply about, and go ask them, is there anything I know how to do that would be valuable to you at this time? Because I'll do a project, I'll sit on your board, I'll just mentor you if that's something I can do. There are a million ways you can step into that gap and help truly purposeful, high impact causes, right? Do some great work. For me, I consider it God's work, and it's just a joy to be a part of his team to help these organizations do his work.
Wow. I love that. Hearing some of your legacy is amazing, that you're leaving and trying to leave. There's another aspect that if we rewind, you were a trailblazer, like you talked about at the beginning in your industry, being a working mom, full-time raising a family and full-time working in corporate America. What was that like, and how have you been able to help other women navigate that? Because I know you're doing a lot to help other women leaders navigate their career journeys.
Well, and thankfully, the world's in a better place for working mothers today than it was then. Maternity leaves are longer, and childcare is more available, and bosses are more used to working mothers, and not thinking you're weird. And so there's a lot of progress that's been made. But I would tell you the number one thing that's still missing for working mothers is a cohort to walk through the journey with. Other people to talk to and share the real mess that's going on in your life, right? The difficulties that just by nature, if you are a couple raising children and you both work, you've got your hands full and you don't have a lot of role models to go to, and you're not even comfortable with some of your colleagues even sharing, right? Because you want them to think you've got it all together. It is really important to walk that journey in community. So one of the things that I do is for the last 6 years, have run it's called a disciple group. I've done 2 3-year groups that had 11 or 12 women in it who were C-suite women who were married with families for the most part. And I just walk with them, and we just talk about the real problems. And I'll just give you one little insight. Working mothers have to figure out when to pray. And we all agree that it's 2 a.m. That's what we've decided. It's 2 a.m. because that's when we have true quiet and peace. And the good thing about God is he just wakes us up at 2 a.m. every night and we talk. So, we have unique challenges, and we need to talk in a safe place. We need to share some of our, I guess today they're called life hacks. I don't even know what that means, but, kind of what are the secrets? And we need to just hold each other up. and say, you know what, I'm here for you. Your child's having a problem at school. Let's talk about that. Your marriage is under pressure. Let's talk about that, because to journey alone for anyone is a bad idea. And that's where I invest my time with working mothers, including my daughters.
Wow. This is so good. Cheryl, I want to hit you with 10 rapid fire questions where you just say the first thing that comes to your mind.
Okay.
Who's the first person you think of when I say servant leadership?
Oh my. First person I think of. Jesus.
All right. 5 words that best describe you.
Responsible. Strong beliefs. Hardworking. Outgoing. That's 4, right?
Yep.
Energetic.
Love it. Favorite author or book?
Well, the Bible for sure, and in business, The Purpose-Driven Life.
Favorite movie?
I'm just kind of a Hugh Grant rom-com person.
Love it. Favorite food?
I'd have to say chicken, don't you think?
I feel like that's the right answer. Favorite thing to do in your free time?
Read.
All right. What's a surprising fact about you?
My first job was teaching knitting lessons. I taught people how to make a scarf and mittens, and I started that when I was 12 years old.
Wow. That's cool. Favorite place you've been?
Singapore. My family lived there for 11 years, and it's a beautiful place in the middle of a beautiful part of the world.
Place you want to go that you have not been?
Israel.
And finally, what's the best advice you've ever received?
Your attitude is your altitude. That's from my mother. She's 91. She's still telling me that.
I love that. Well, Cheryl, thank you so much for being on the Servant Leadership Podcast and sharing some insights. I'm excited for people to go read your book if they haven't, and to just learn more from you.
Well, thank you, Chris. I've had a lot of fun talking to you today.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Servant Leadership Podcast. If you enjoyed what you heard, please give it a thumbs up and leave a comment below. Don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell to never miss an update. Be sure to check out the servantleadershippodcast.org for more updates and additional bonus content.